invited. Hey everyone, we welcome everyone here. We're just waiting for Yolanda to join us. We're really looking forward to this discussion. It's going to be a really good one. Hi Yolanda.
Hello. Hi, Daniel, and hi,
How are you
Rihanna.
doing?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
It's lovely to see you in person, and this is since we set up this live, time has just completely flown. Um,
Yeah,
but, but like I said, like when I was preparing for this live last night, I was really inspired by your journey, by what you represent, by how you trailblazing in the field. So last night was a really good read for me, and I'm really looking forward to our live discussion today. I just wanted to basically introduce you, what we'll be discussing, and then you can take the lead from there, Yolanda, if that's all right.
okay, no problem.
Okay, cool. Welcome, everyone. I see people are joining in. So we're just going to wait maybe a minute or so. There's
Okay.
quite a few people jumping on at the moment. But basically, guys, today we will be discussing with Yolanda Labisi Cousins. She is an incredible person, attorney, someone who has gone through some hardship in her life. And I really connected to that part of her story because I think in order to inspire, you have to go through some sort of challenge and hardship. And I often say that our purpose is often found in overcoming a challenge and using that strength to help empower people going through difficult times and challenges like that.
Yeah.
So Yolanda was involved in a motorbike accident. She went through some challenges, which I'd love to find out more about, but she overcame that. She got 37 distinctions, guys, in 4 years. Just absolutely incredible. I mean, that in itself is so inspiring and motivating. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that before we go into the property talk. But Yolanda's key speciality is property conveyancing, property law, international property law. I read that you also facilitated one of the largest cash purchases of a foreign property from a South African resident, which is also very interesting. I'd love to know a bit more about how all that works. So Yolanda will be discussing important things to keep an eye out for in property, when you're signing contracts, how it affects your estate. I'll be discussing some important estate planning tips for international asset ownership, when you own assets besides those in South Africa. And Oriana will be discussing a bit of the advantages on having a trust to help you grow your wealth and protect your family. So Yolanda, to take the lead, we look forward to hearing your story and a bit of important tips that you have to share today.
Oh, thank you so much, Daniel. And yeah, thank you for having me on this platform. It's an honor to come and share about what I love doing, which is helping people. I think that's what's at the center of everything that we do as professionals. The primary focus is that we are helping our clients, and for me to be in that position is really, really a privilege. But yeah, so I'm Yolanda Labisi Cousins, as you have already said. I own a law firm here at the V&A Waterfront, Labisi Cousins Attorneys, and we specialize primarily in property transactions. I don't know if you want me to start with the story of the bike or just jump in.
No, I'd like to understand where your willpower came from, because also to run a law firm is challenging. And I think
Yeah.
that your story to get to that point, is a lot of people could learn a bit from it. But whatever you're comfortable sharing on that, because for me, it was inspiring to read it. And I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's true. And it is challenging to run a law firm. But you know what? When you understand what you are able and capable of doing, then you use that to, soldier through whatever
Yeah.
the challenge is, and you just carry on. And for me, I think I just always reflect on how I've always managed to get out of some difficult situations like the bike accident, and where I lost my memory, and when I was admitted in hospital, I couldn't remember. After getting out, I couldn't remember certain simple things. The only thing I could remember how to do was my job, which is funny because
Wow.
I was
Yo,
a
that is a
legislative,
divine intervention if I've ever
yeah,
heard it.
yeah. I
Oh,
was a
beautiful.
legislative linguist at the time, and I knew how to do my job, but I couldn't remember where I put my purse, where I put my card, my
Sure.
keys, and I would read. The reason I studied law is
Yeah,
that when I got out of the hospital, I would read one page or one paragraph of an article or whatever,
yeah,
and immediately after reading, I will have forgotten what I read, what I just read.
sure.
So for me, that freaked me out because I
Yeah,
obviously my brain is my real estate,
yes,
and I
yes.
use it to earn a living, and so I got freaked out, and I thought I had to do some, I had to heal
Mm.
mentally and physically, and then I also had to tap into the higher power, and for
Oh,
me, that's God.
yeah,
And that's how I prayed and I tested God, and I said, if you really love me, you're gonna
yeah,
help me. I'm gonna study law, and you're gonna
yeah,
help me pass. And
yeah,
if I knew that at the level that I was at the time, with not remembering simple things like a paragraph, studying law
yeah,
sounded like it's crazy.
yeah. And also,
What are
like
you?
Yolanda, I like what you said. Like, I also am someone of faith, and what I found was I was also in a situation where I lost almost everything in terms of my academic side
Mm,
because I was actually academically excluded from my university.
oh,
But
that's hectic.
the whole year that I was off, there was a vision in my heart that I would go back to that university and
Yeah.
get my degree.
Wow.
And that's what divine
Yeah.
intervention is about. When the Lord
Yeah.
opens a path for you and you follow the right way in which you move, you have a power other than just yourself, which creates massive energy for movement. So, like, especially for you, like losing like memory, like forgetting where a purse is a massive thing because, like you said, in law and in our practice, our brains are our
Yeah.
real estate. We
Yeah.
don't buy
Absolutely.
machinery and resell machinery. Our machinery
Absolutely.
is up here, and we have
Yeah.
to really guard it and protect
Yeah.
it.
No,
So
absolutely. And if this doesn't work,
yeah,
it kind of makes you question a lot of things. But
yes,
fortunately, I understand that we're not meant to do life just alone and relying on ourselves. And that's why I never rely on myself.
yeah,
I know that God is the one that helps me with everything. And fast forward, after writing down that prayer request, and I
yes,
put down, I registered for LLB, and I
yo,
put on my fridge, thank God for 10 distinctions in the first year
yo,
while working full time. While working full time, I put it
yes,
there. And I was like, I'm gonna get 10 distinctions, and I don't know how because my mind is messed
yeah,
up. But at the end of the year, I got 10 distinctions of my first year while I was going to work 9 to
yo,
5, and then I was studying after.
yeah,
And I did the same thing the following year. Thank God for 10 distinctions, and I got 10 distinctions. And I did the same in my third year, and I got 10 distinctions. And in my fourth year, I could have also gotten 10 distinctions, but I met my
yeah.
husband, which was an amazing blessing. And we got
Hey, we're
married
gonna
in
have to
my
have a
fourth.
talk with them.
Yeah, and we got married in my fourth year. But you know what? At that time, I was like, okay, Yolanda, God has proven to you that He can help you, and you can
Yes,
relax now. And not everything is about being an overachiever.
yeah,
I now know that I'm healed. I'm able to,
show
operate at a
up.
higher capacity, and
Yeah,
I was okay. And I mean, I still graduated cum laude
sure.
nonetheless. So yeah,
Oh,
that's my story in a nutshell, and I think that's why nothing can ever deter me.
yes,
Even now, it's not easy doing what I do. Every month, I
yeah,
have to think about all the challenges I
oh,
must face.
yeah,
I have to think about how are you going to make it to the end of the
yeah,
month. Every month, I still have
yeah.
to. But those things, because of what I've already been through, those
Being
things are
through.
nothing. No, those things
Yes.
are nothing.
And
I'm
also,
already
Yolanda,
prepared.
what you've done through doing so well and working so hard is the foundation of the
Yeah,
home
yeah,
is so solid.
yeah,
So that even if the building is
yeah.
removed, you've still got that foundation to build with and grow with. And
Mm,
it's incredible that you're also opening opportunities for up and coming young women and people that maybe haven't had advantages, and you're creating space just through your voice
I try. I
to open
do my
doors
best.
inside themselves to say, listen, do you know what? Some people are studying full time and they're worried, like, can I achieve this? But you
Mm,
were working full time,
yeah,
studying, and you can still do it. And what we often do is we sell ourselves short.
yeah,
We put a limit on our capacity because of our experience. We have unlimited
yeah.
capacity when we have a vision and we live life well. The
Absolutely.
doors will just begin to open. But if we put a limit on ourselves, then we're actually selling ourselves short. So, like what you've shared today, just shows that anything is possible. Even with a brain injury, you've
Yeah.
come out of it so well and you've recovered well.
Yeah.
And like I've been watching some of your reels and stuff that you share, and that's how we connected. I think you watched
Yeah.
Ariana's live
Yeah.
with Lisa, and
Yes.
you just said like it's so important to share information for the
Yeah.
community, even if
Absolutely.
they're not our clients, just to be able to provide
Yeah.
advice saves people something in the long run. So I really
Absolutely.
appreciate you sharing that. Thank you so much.
No,
And I think
absolutely, Daniel.
yeah. So
Yeah.
let's chat about some when people are purchasing properties. I know there's a lot of paperwork that's involved.
Mm.
Sometimes the people that are conducting the paperwork might put things in that put us at risk.
Mm.
Can you
Yeah.
just share a bit of your experience on contracts with property, what to keep an eye out for? Maybe if someone wants to reach out to you on certain aspects,
Mm.
and we can just go from there.
No, absolutely. Sure. The process of buying property, people say when I talk about property, I glow. And I think it's because I've seen so many situations that are avoidable when going through contracts, in transferring property ownership, and in dealing with clients who, fortunately, some of whom, at the time they come to me, they've not signed anything. I'm able to help them, correct some of the things. But it really makes me so upset when I see unfavorable clauses, because the process of buying property for somebody that's looking forward to moving into their new home, maybe there's a new pool for their children to enjoy, and it's big enough for them to have space. It's literally a dream come true, and something that amazing to be affected by contractual clauses, because when you are signing, most people are not even thinking of anything that is malicious. They just do it in good faith and they just
Yeah.
sign. And that is where, when I get those contracts and I have to implement and enforce,
Yes.
that's where I get upset,
Yeah.
because I'm like, this is an unfair clause on the buyer. It shouldn't have been here.
Yeah.
This is not right that you are saying the seller should do this. It shouldn't have been here. If maybe a clause that is maybe coming from an agent that says, the seller will be liable
Yes.
to in any whether or not they're in breach for commission. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, but can't do that, or the buyer will indemnify the seller
Yeah.
against paying a commission. If they can't claim it from the seller, they can claim it from the buyer. And I'm like, that's so wrong. So those are some of the things, and there's a lot.
Yeah.
And I think for me, my passion is giving people that information. It doesn't matter whether the people are my clients
Yeah.
or people that I'm going to work with. The fact that you get to receive that information, learn from it, and make the right decisions for yourself and your family,
Yeah.
and avoid financial loss. Not only that, but time, frustration,
Yeah.
anxiety, being overwhelmed. That is what comes with the process of buying property. If you put your trust in the
Wrong.
wrong people, or maybe
Yes.
if you just transact in good faith without worrying about, let me understand what I'm signing.
Yeah.
So I think
Or
that's
get a
where,
professional, like you to review a document before you sign.
absolutely,
But
it
also
can be
what we
me, it
find,
can be, yeah, it can be
yeah,
me,
but
it can be
Yolanda, what we
someone
find
else.
is that it's often rushed. So
Yeah.
like you have your sale price, then people are like, hey, sign this, we'll get it sorted, we need you to move in. And
Yeah,
I
you
think
know
that
what?
also puts people at risk,
Yeah.
because if they can just say, hey, hold on, I just need to speak to
Yeah.
Yolanda, even if I pay her to review my contract, so
Yeah.
that I have peace when I
Yeah.
sign this, because
Yeah.
you can't put a price on the peace of mind that you signing a document,
Yeah.
someone professional like Yolanda has looked at
Yeah.
it and reviewed it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in order for us to be able to even help our clients, we've even prepared, packages where they get to have their contract reviewed if they're working with us as a client, and we do that for free. But the most important thing is you can only review a contract before you sign it. So
Yeah.
for me, I think the most important thing that people must know is that there are certain clauses in a contract, whether you are a seller or a buyer.
Yeah.
And I'll give examples. There's the footstoots clause. So if you're a buyer, you need to understand that the clause says that you're buying the property as is. And you may not know that the law also protects you. There's the disclosure forms that the seller has to sign,
Yeah.
disclosing all the faults that are in the property.
Yes.
And that's according to the law. But sometimes, sellers say, I don't know of any defects in the property. So you can't place your big investment in the hands of somebody who doesn't even know
No.
you. And if they say they don't know, then what can you do? So
Yeah.
there are things that you can do. You can add conditions in that offer to say that you want an inspection to be done
That's
before transferring the
clever.
property. And if there's a latent defect that is uncovered, then it will be at the expense of the seller, unless,
Sure.
of course, you've negotiated down the price, and there you
Yeah.
need to be reasonable and consider
Yeah.
the seller as well, because the seller can't lose money from the asking price and also have to pay for latent defects. But
Yes.
yeah, and also
Sure.
understanding as a buyer that, you know, the law, if you go to a property and you view it and there are certain things that are broken, even though the disclosure you know, regulations say that the seller has to disclose, you
Yeah.
also have the responsibility to look at the things that are wrong with the property.
Sure.
And
Good point.
if you are too excited, which is what mostly happens,
Yeah.
and you miss the handle that's broken, the
Yeah.
doorknob, or the,
Yeah.
you know, the light is not
Your
working. Those are
vision's
called,
like blurred with excitement.
yeah,
Yeah.
and those are called patent defects. So you unfortunately not protected by the law for patent defects, and those would be seen as the defects that any reasonable person would have picked up if they were
Sure.
diligent enough in viewing. So people
Sure.
who don't understand that then sign the contract, you know, and miss a simple thing such as maybe we can include a clause to protect you that, okay, you may have missed certain things,
Yeah.
but this condition that we're putting in is going to help you in the event that there's something that needs to be attended to. So you can
Yeah.
comfortably proceed with the transaction without worrying about you know, whether or not you're going to be losing money at the end.
Yolanda, I'm not even buying a property, but just speaking to you is making me feel safer. So now I can
That's the point.
understand how your clients feel, because honestly, like, there's just a little bit that you've touched on, but it's such important points. Having to physically go and look, having you to review the contract before you sign it. I mean, it's small things, but like you say, when there's a rush and you're excited, you just want to sign.
Yeah.
But that's the exact time you have to pause and consult. And like,
Yeah.
I like what you said, like, even if you buy it footsteps, I don't know if I said it correctly, but
Yeah.
you buy it as is, but there could be something that pops up that you can still protect yourself with. Is that correct in the contract?
Yes, if you buy footstools,
Yeah.
we can help you protect yourself by putting in a condition
Yeah.
that says, like, this thing says I'm buying it as is, but the condition is saying I still want somebody to go, a professional,
Okay,
and
nice.
have a look at the property and inspect and look at the things that I would not even be able to see, because latent defects simply mean hidden defects.
Yeah.
You can't see them. You can't see that there's a leak in the roof,
Yes. Yeah.
or, you know, certain things
Or
behind, you know,
drainage
or
issues that
yeah,
could cause
because when you go
flooding.
view property, you're not moving furniture around to see what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
So those are some of the clauses. There's many other things that you can do to
Yes.
protect yourself, and the seller is also, you know, at risk, and they can do certain things to also protect themselves before accepting an offer.
Yeah.
Because remember, as much as you are having somebody that's representing you, and even with us in our capacity as attorney realtors, when we
Yeah.
represent sellers, we always say to sellers that when you have somebody that represents you, consider the fact that the person that's helping you sell your property is seen as though they are you. So if they make any representations, those are a reflection on you, and you can be held accountable in court
Sure.
based on those representations. So it's always important for them as well to understand who they're dealing with, and even when they are accepting the offer, to have it reviewed.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I have a client who was selling property, and I handle everything that has to do with her property transaction. So she had an agent help her, amazing guy that she's been using for a long time.
Yeah.
But she had been using the guy for rentals, not for sales. So now with
Okay.
the sale, it was agreement. I want
Yes.
to accept the
Yes.
offer. So we look at it, we're like, okay, let's see if there's anything. I was thinking there wouldn't even be anything wrong.
Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
I was reading that it was subject to a suspensive condition, and what that means is you as the seller,
Yeah.
if you've given a mandate to an agent and they find you a buyer who can only afford the property by getting a loan, registering a bond, it
Yeah.
means you must wait for the time that you've given for them to receive the bond, 30 days. So the contract,
Sure.
the wording on the contract, and normally in that situation, the seller has the opportunity to extend the due date of the bond.
Yeah.
Alternatively, say no, you didn't fulfill the condition, the contract falls away. But
Yeah.
sellers obviously don't understand it at that level because they are not they're not property
Yes.
lawyers. So now in this clause, what the agent did is they put a clause that said the agent has unilateral discretion to extend the bond due date so it means the discretion they don't need to consult the seller. They can keep on giving the buyer
30
more
days,
time, and you know the
60 days.
implication. Yeah, the implication of that is the seller's hands are tied, so the seller can't accept any other offer from anyone, irrespective of how much money they're losing from the bond each month as the time goes by. And that is what we had to strike out and remove from the agreement to say, this is not in your favor. You need to
It's
be
not
the
fair.
one. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because also, like,
unfortunately,
if you need that liquidity at a certain date and you think in your mind 30 days, and now you're 4 months down the
yeah.
line, but they say, hey, look at the contract,
Yeah,
you signed it,
it
we
says
can
that
extend.
you agreed, yeah,
Yeah,
and you've given open mandate. Other agents find you a buyer, you can't do anything.
yeah,
So, yeah, those are some of the things. So it affects both buyers and sellers, and I
yeah.
think it's important to just have full comprehension of what you are signing before you sign it, because even though we are able to help after you've signed, it's very
More
difficult
difficult.
to tamper with a binding agreement. To help
Yeah,
you get out of a binding agreement is difficult. So
yeah.
it's not impossible. And I also don't like my clients to have to pay a lawyer to go to court and fight. I like to
It's
prefer,
painful as
I
well.
like
It's painful.
to prefer,
Emotionally, it's draining.
yeah,
But I think, like, what you saying actually applies to any major decision we make in our life. It's so important to consult with a professional in that sort of field. When we're
yeah,
getting married, let's consult with someone on
yeah,
marriage laws. When we're doing property, let's consult with a professional. When
yeah,
we're doing an estate, let's
yeah.
consult with someone who's administering full
And that is
time.
important, and estate in
Yeah,
particular, Daniel. So
yeah,
even in property transactions, so and that is something that you can also speak to because you do
yes,
that a lot.
yes,
But you know, when the person comes to me with a contract that's not signed and they are buying the property in their name and it's their fifth property, I'm now
yeah,
able to say, hang on a minute, do you
yeah,
understand the estate
yes,
consequences? You know, the estate planning consequences of you putting a property that's not even your primary
yeah.
residence in your name, that's gonna, you
Have
know, earn
a
rental
mass,
income. So
yeah.
maybe you can advise people on the importance of that
Yeah.
as well.
So, like, in terms of the trust side, that's quite a nice vehicle, which Ariana will touch on some points on. My bit that I'm going to add here is if you own assets outside of South Africa, but also in South Africa as a South African resident, and what international ownership actually does to a person in terms of their estate planning. Now, the question that I wanted to lay out is why do people want to have assets outside of South Africa? What could some of the reasons be? So after some thought, I realized like sometimes kids want to study abroad. So having a liquid account outside of South Africa could help for that. People may want to buy holiday homes in Spain, for example, which which you would know about. But also they may want to gain residency in another country so they could have dual citizenship. And obviously, there's also the financial planning side of currency hedging, where you could like start to invest in the dollar and hope that it goes against the rand. So those are some of the reasons why people would own international assets. But
Yeah.
now the question is, should you have one international will or two wills or three wills? So I wanted to dive into this a little bit more. And
Yeah.
what I usually like to advise people is that remember that when you die in South Africa, the letter of executorship that is issued is not recognized by other courts in other countries.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
example, if you have a house in England, when you get a letter of executorship issued in South Africa, you still have to apply for a probate in England, which is similar to a letter of executorship. But to get that application going, you still need to consult with someone that side that's a professional that can apply for it. So you must understand that even if you have one will, there are some time delays because your letter here isn't recognized, for example, in the UK.
Yeah.
So having one will is quite good in my view when you only have liquid assets in foreign countries, because we have quite a good law in terms of everything that's bequeathed to a surviving spouse is estate duty exempt. So Section 4Q will apply if you're giving everything to your spouse, and that includes your international estate.
Yeah.
So having one will is quite good when you only have liquid assets that you can deal with.
Yeah.
You need to really seriously consider having two wills when you own a movable property in, for example, the UK, in Portugal, in Spain. You should have a will that says this will only governs my UK assets. This will only governs my SA assets, because then you're not having to apply for different applications at the court. Your UK will can run when you pass, and your SA will can run in different administrations. So
Yeah.
very important to consult with a professional in that country, and also gain knowledge on the country and find out what is important to the court there. Because, for example, you might say, hey, I'm going to give my house in Mauritius to my cousin, but Mauritius has forced heirship. So you don't have freedom to say that. The courts in Mauritius, I actually found out about this last night, is that Germany also have forced heirship. So in South Africa, we have a beautiful thing called freedom of testation, where we can decide who we give our assets to.
Yeah.
But in foreign countries, some of them, you don't have that freedom. So in Mauritius, you have to give to a bloodline and you can't give outside, which restricts you as a testator. Because, for example, what happens if your child gets involved in the wrong crowd and now they have issues?
Yeah.
That asset could be lost through
Yeah.
forced heirship. So you
Yeah.
need to look at, when you're doing multiple wills, just double check that the country doesn't have forced heirship. But also, when you've got a will in a foreign country and you've got two wills now, Yolanda, you have to be careful, because when you update one will,
Yeah.
remember there's always a clause in the will, I revoke all
Yeah.
previous wills.
Yes.
So be
Yeah.
careful not to revoke a foreign will, because
Yeah.
then you're going to have one thing in South
Yeah.
Africa. So
Yeah.
now you see how you have to partner with a professional,
Yeah.
and rather partner with two
Absolutely.
professionals that speak to each other.
Yeah.
So for a Spain property and a South African property, you have your two executors. But if the Spain person says, let's update your will, they have to speak to the South African executor and say, look
Yeah.
at the draft. Then we would look at it. I would look at the will, for example, and say, hey, but you're revoking all previous wills. That means we're not going to have a say here. So you have to
Yeah.
be careful, very careful when you've got two wills around.
Yeah.
So that's quite an important thing. And I mean, forced heirship is also a very interesting concept.
Yeah.
So I read a bit about that, and that was quite interesting to know. But also another thing to consider when you're doing international property and assets is, what are the tax implications of all of
Yeah.
this? So
Yeah.
that's another massive thing. And like us, we love to partner with professionals in fields that specialize in tax, for example. We're not
Yeah.
specialists in tax.
Yeah.
We've studied tax through our diplomas,
Yeah.
but I prefer to speak to a CA with international
Yeah.
tax law and say, this is the state that we are lining up. What are the tax implications of, for example, having this amount of capital in the States? And they say, listen, this is the amount X, Y, and Z, and then at least we can advise properly. So by consulting with professionals, you get such a clear map. It's untangled.
Yeah.
And like you say, like when you're talking about reading contracts for property, I could see that you are you so grounded in it, because you said you would just read through it and expect nothing, but something popped up like straight away because you practice it. But above all of that, you love what you
Yeah.
do. And when you work with people that love what they do, there's a bit of added value that people don't
Yeah.
see. So like
Yeah.
with our work as estate administrators and doing wills, we love what we do. So a lot of our service is beyond the realms of what a normal professional would provide. And
Yeah.
there's value in that. And you do the same with your clients. So the
Yeah.
tax is a very important matter. But I did more reading last night just for fun.
Yeah.
And I realized that there are actually accounts in the Isle of Man, for example, where joint ownership of the account is done. So I could have an account in the Isle of Man with my wife. When the first dying account holder passes, it automatically transfers to the surviving joint owner. Doesn't go through an
Wow.
estate.
So there's no probate, and we
No.
all. Wow,
And
that's amazing.
we recently had a situation in similar where there's an Isle of Man bank account, joint holders. When the first person passes, it automatically just moved to the surviving joint holder. And I did more reading on this, and I find that there's a principle, and it's called a principle of survivorship for these joint accounts in foreign realms. So now you have to also incorporate this in your planning.
Yeah.
Because you might think, oh, I've got an account in Isle of Man. When I die, it will come into my estate and my wife will get this. But What happens if you got a joint account with a girlfriend in the Isle of Man, but you got 4 kids that need you to support
Yeah.
you? Now
Yeah.
you die, that whole joint account automatically goes through a principle of survivorship. It's an actual term. And this applies to UK, Ireland, Isle of Man. There's a few other countries. So you also have to look at this and say, guys, let's look at this. I've heard about this principle of survivorship. Ask the person who's handling the account in Isle of Man, does this apply to my
Yeah.
account? If they say yes, you need to adjust your planning. So
Yeah.
that's something interesting that I
Yeah.
read about last night, and I've confirmed that is valid. So very interesting. It passes through the estate, goes directly to the
Yeah.
survivor.
Sure, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a lot of complexities and moving parts when it comes to your estate planning and your buying of property. And for me, what is fascinating is that everything is actually intertwined if you think about it. It's
Yeah.
just you doing it at different stages of your life. So
Yeah.
even when you're not thinking about death at this moment, you're just buying property, you're gonna move with your
Yeah.
family. That is
Yeah.
essentially an act that affects how you are planning for your future, whether by default, right? In
Yeah.
South Africa, you can either plan by saying, I want this to happen and go, when this happens, I want this to go to this person.
Yeah.
Or you can do, it can happen by default where the government says, okay, we're going to use our spider system and
Yes.
used to give it to whoever that the law says you must give
Yeah.
it to. So
Yeah.
it's quite interesting, but
Yeah.
the primary thing is that you know, it's the planning of it all.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so interested to also hear Ariana talking about trust, because
Yes.
for me, when I advise my clients, I think, you know, there are certain instances where depending on what the client is, how big the portfolio is and what they're doing, or maybe if they have a family, doesn't even have to be a big portfolio. Maybe they have a family
Yeah.
and they need to have a family trust because they have minor children. You know, some people choose to do their estate planning using a will. Some people choose to do a trust and a will. Some people choose to do a trust,
Yeah.
and they put everything in the trust, and they put the, you know, the kids as their beneficiary, etc. And
Yes.
so for me, my primary focus is on, okay, so if you set up a trust like that and you have property, is it best when you put the property in a company and then the company shares are
Yeah.
owned by the trust instead
Yeah.
of putting it directly in the trust? You know, those are all the things
Yeah.
that people need to consider and just
Yes.
seek some clarity, and yeah,
Yeah.
and also the benefits of having a trust that Ariana will touch on.
Yes, and I mean, like, I think a word that's coming up quite a bit in this conversation is
Mm,
clarity, and professionals that have studied
mm,
the things that they specialize in create clarity, and through
yeah,
clarity, efficiency just
yeah,
flows because we're not creating tangles or clouds. We're
mm,
actually opening up the cloud so that there's clear,
mm,
effective communication. And you know what? I've said this previously, is that is where our
yeah,
kindness is as professionals, is when
yeah,
we consult with someone, they walk away not saying, hey, what the heck were they saying? I don't
yeah,
understand. Where they
mm,
walk away and said, you know what, I actually feel safe and
yeah,
I'm happy with that meeting.
yeah,
So I think clarity, and what we're doing today is providing clarity in some way,
yeah,
because
yeah,
this will be on our platforms for life, and people can always go and say, oh, I remember Yolanda talking about property. Let me go look. Oh, let me email
yeah,
her. So I
yeah,
think there's a bigger picture to this, which I'm grateful to be a part of, and Oriana as well.
mm,
So
yeah,
just the last point on the international side for me is that remember there's also language restrictions and language barriers.
yeah,
So if you own property in a country that has a language which isn't primarily English, you'll have to then get consultants that do translations, and it can add
mm,
extra costs. So there's quite a
yeah.
lot. That's just a hyper summary, but those are some of the points. And then Oriana is going to touch on the benefits of trusts as an estate planning tool.
Okay.
Cool, Oriana.
Hi, Yolanda.
Hello, hello.
It's been so interesting to hear about all your thoughts on property. And as you know, if you own multiple properties, trust can be especially effective because obviously property is a high growth asset, and there are various benefits to putting that in a family trust. So setting up a trust is a good idea because it protects your assets. You know, there's so many uncertainties in life, such as, you know, divorce, death, even liquidation if you have a company, or sequestration of your personal estate. You know, these are all risks that people don't think about until, unfortunately, they happen sometimes. So it's very good to separate your personal estate from, other risks such as business risks and divorce, for example, even death.
Yeah.
So having a trust can create some flexibility as well. There's legislative changes that come about. You can protect your assets in a trust in that way as well. So, for example, if someone gets remarried 2 or 3 times and they have children from a previous marriage, that's always a situation where trust could be useful as well if they want to ensure that their assets get distributed to their children, for example. But they still want to provide for their surviving spouse, their current spouse.
Yeah.
And in that situation, it would be a good idea to maybe put your current spouse and your children from a previous marriage in a trust as beneficiaries. And then you can distribute income to your surviving spouse just to make sure they are cared for, but your children will inherit the capital, which is your property. So that's also a good idea. And like you touched on earlier, if you have children who are either minors or mentally impaired or physically impaired and they can't actually look after their own affairs, that's always a good reason to create a trust as well. A trust can be created while you are alive, which is an inter vivos trust, or it can be a provision in your will. For example, you pass away and your children are still minors, then you have a trust clause, which is so important because if you don't have a trust clause, and your children are minors, that money goes to the Guardians Fund, which is administered by the government. And I'm sure, you know the struggles that come with that.
Get a picture, yeah.
Benefits to having a trust.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like what Oriana touched on is like, remember that an effective planner will try and reduce the amount of capital and growth in your personal name, because when you die, there's capital gains consequences, there's estate duty consequences. So now, if you've got your primary residence, which we always advise will be in your personal name because of that capital gains rebate that you get. But say, for example, 20 years ago, I had my primary residence and I bought a holiday home on Clifton's beachfront for 100,000 Rand, okay? And I put it in a trust. Now, if I had kept that in my name and I died today and it's worth 57 million Rand, estate duty tax 20% over 3.5 million and 25% over 30 million.
Yeah.
So on R1 million over 30, you're paying 250,000 in tax in your personal name. Now, if that's sitting in the trust, you're not getting hit with any of those bills. And nothing freezes your lender. It keeps running. So your kids are still provided for. So I think that that's a very important thing. If you're looking at investing in high growth assets, set up a trust. Keep your personal profile as small as you can, so that when you pass, you don't get hit with a lot of consequences. But when you set up a trust, you have to set it up with professionals that can really guide and protect you year on year, so it isn't open to attacks. So I think that that's a good point. But what I've been seeing quite a lot of, which is a little bit concerning, is that clients of ours will have a family trust where their kids are named as sole beneficiaries on the family trust. They had previously consulted with an executor's firm, and they are advising you must put a testamentary trust in your will. So when I met with this client, I said, listen, you've got a trust to benefit your child. Why not just put why not put the trust as the beneficiary? Why are you going to set up 2 trusts?
Yeah.
But
it doesn't make sense.
What you find out is that executor's firm will be trustees on the testamentary trust.
Oh, my word.
So there's an interest there.
Yeah.
So when I said to him, do you really want 2 family trusts after you pass? You've set this up so well.
Yeah.
Just bequeath everything to that trust and your kids will be kept.
Yeah.
And that's also what you have to keep an eye out for. If you've got a family trust where your kids are beneficiaries, you don't need to put that trust clause in your will. Just bequeath it to your family trust.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It makes sense if you do it like that, I think, Yeah,
and remember, when you're bequeathing to a trust in your will, it's bequeathed to the trustees of the trust. So the wording is also important to make sure that it's very neat and clean.
Yeah.
But,
and that's where the professional comes in handy, absolutely.
And it's small movements, Yolanda. It's very small movements, but for us it's small, but for someone down the line, it's a massive impact that we could save them from, and a lot of hurt and emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
we find clients are sometimes hesitant to pay that fee just to review a will or, like you say, a property contract. But it can save so much money in the long run. Like you said, you don't want to have to go to court and you'll spend way more than what you would have, spent to review that document.
Absolutely. I just saw recently on the news, I mean, it's something unrelated to property sale, but nonetheless has to do with property. And a certain doctor in Durban has spent over 700,000 Rand in legal fees fighting somebody who's in his property. So it just shows you how expensive, it gives you a picture of how expensive the court process is. And the sad thing is he hasn't gotten a resolution yet. So he may still he may still need to, to spend more money. And maybe money is not an issue for you, but the energy, the anxiety, if you are a busy person with a busy career, you don't have time to be going to lawyers' offices and asking for assistance, and so it's important to just do due diligence.
And you've got so much weight on your shoulders already that you might even start to question the people that are helping you if you're 700,000 down and there still isn't resolution.
Yeah, it's like
now you're like, who do I trust?
Yeah.
So it's very challenging, but that's the gift of having access to professionals before and whenever you're signing important documents. Also remember, like with an estate, people often focus on the cost of the estate, but people very rarely focus on estate is actually there to provide closure to family. There's no cost that can give when you do an estate that's well run, the closure that your kids feel through that. The 3.5% executor's fees, you won't even consider it. So the closure, but also the quality of service that you're getting. So someone might come to you and say, hey, I'll do your estate for 0.5%, let's go. But now remember, you out exchange somewhere, because they can always say, but guys, we're doing you a favor. Just give us 4 years to do it. We'll get there. But now something goes wrong, that person resigns from that place and you got a new person in. So I think with estates, remember, one of the last documents that your family will read of yours is your will. One of the last experiences that they have with you will be your estate. Just making sure it is a clean, pure process, especially if you've got kids. You need the right people on your team, honestly. And the closure that will bring is the cost will always take care of themselves, but the emotional closure will stay with people forever. People forget about how much they spend for the professional service if it provides complete closure.
No, absolutely agree with you. I want to ask Daniel, in your experience, so with certain people, because estate planning is not just for, it's also meant to take care of the situation now and also the future, right? So when somebody identifies that maybe I've made a mistake in terms of how I've been stacking up my assets, and like for instance, I had a situation where somebody bought or they rather received inherited properties in their name, and it's a lot of properties, more than 30 million collectively. And now they're thinking of ways, can we create a usufruct to limit estate duty? I just want to find out from you, are there any other ways, and maybe in your experience, in your practice, that people, are there ways that they can use to limit the tax implication on their estate planning if they already messed it up, for lack of a better word? So is there a resolution for that?
Linda, it's not the worst mess up when you considering, hey, I'm making too much, I've got this tax liability, but I understand what you're saying. It's not easy. And that's the thing, is people think that having a lot of wealth is like, it's this beautiful picture, but it's actually a massive burden. And that's why I think when you've got a lot of wealth, you just really need to stick to people that you trust and just engage with people that you have a good feeling with and work together. So there's a number of aspects which you can apply. But what I always advise is that you have to have a team of professionals that specialize in different fields, get all of them to come together and then make a decision collectively. Because the more minds that are at the table, the more amazing the road becomes down the line. So don't just stick to one person and say, hey, this person is going to give me all the advice. Because there might be someone that comes in and says, hey, but let's explore this, and it could lead to an amazing resolution. So one of the things with this sort of setup is if there's multiple properties, the good thing is that they're still alive. So they can still make movements. And one of those movements could be to set up an inter vivos trust. So how the movement would be is you wouldn't put all of the assets into the trust and you wouldn't donate all the assets, because if you donate the asset to the trust, you're going to get hit with donations tax now. So
Yeah.
what you would do is you would move one of the properties which could generate rental income, but you loan it to the trust. You can get an interest approved loan, but it doesn't need to be a massive interest rate. You loan that, but you move it into the trust. That trust then generates rental income, which will repay the loan. Over time, we hope that that loan is finished, so when they die, there's less in their personal name.
Yeah.
And remember how a usufruct works. Okay, so usufruct is, for example, you've got your wife, you want them to live well and get fruits, but you want your kids to have the property.
Yeah.
Exactly what
Yeah.
Ariana was saying earlier. The trust that you form, the inter vivos trust, the capital, so there's a capital beneficiary and an income beneficiary in every trust. The capital beneficiary per the inter vivos trust will be your descendants. And you can put clauses in so it can keep flowing forever, basically, if you want. Capital beneficiaries will be your children. Income beneficiaries can be yourself, and it can be your spouse. So that if you die, they can still benefit through the trust. But it's about putting that structure in place now. And it's not an overnight process, but it's a building process. And every year that you're repaying your loan, you hope you don't loan it and die tomorrow, because then it comes into your estate.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just have to be careful on your motorbike. You have to maybe get guard railings, okay? But you know what I'm saying is that, like, the goal is to eventually pay it back, but do it through a proper channel that you're accountable to all stakeholders. SARS is still getting what they need. The advisors that are on board, you have your annual AGMs chaired by professional trustees. So when we act as professional trustees, we chair the AGM. So we make sure that there's an agenda set, we record it, and that way you can also manage, like, okay, my debt to the loan from me from the trust was 10 million when we started, but 7 years down the line, because the rental industry is doing so well, can also use your 100,000 Rand donations free allowance to put into the trust to pay back yourself. So there's different avenues, but you hope in 10 years that 5 million now is 200,000. It's out of your personal name. So when you die, it's moving.
Yeah, no, that's true. There are still some opportunities to do something while you're still alive.
Yeah. And there's also, like, remember, with the trust, if your kids are beneficiaries, remember, if the property's moved, when you die and they're going to inherit, there will be, the movement isn't as hectic if they don't want to pull it out of the trust. They can still benefit forever, but the property, when you die and it's in your name, you have to transfer it out.
It has to be transferred, So
but once you move it into the trust, if you put a clause to say your descendants, each child that comes by, you don't have to die transfer. All those transfer fees in between are taken care of, but you still need to have consultation with professional property attorneys like yourself to advise on, like, how the movements will work, what clauses we're going to put in place. So there's definitely ways and means, but remember that you always have to, like, pay to Caesar what's due to Caesar. But if Caesar gives you allowances, let's explore them.
Use the allowances.
Consult with Caesar. And, like, we're going to pay them something, but let's just make sure that we're not getting taken advantage of or being reckless.
Not paying more than what you actually can be.
Exactly.
What you should.
Yes.
I also wanted to add about trusts. A nice thing about trusts is when you die, your assets don't go into your beneficiary's estate right away. So if you leave them in a will, they will obviously be transferred to your beneficiaries. But if they're in a trust and you have beneficiaries there, then they can't fall into your beneficiaries' creditors. As well.
That's protecting.
Exactly, it protects your family assets when you pass away.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think, you know, it feels like we've covered a few years in this conversation of like, content, but that's the beauty of what we do. Like, literally, there's so much that goes into this, but it's so personal as well. So, like we can obviously tell that you love what you do, we love what we do, and I think when we have conversations, it really provides such benefit to our listeners who we ultimately serve. Like you said, Yolanda, you are there to help people, and we have the same mantra as that. And I think that having discussions like this will be beneficial for a lot of people that want to look at, hey, what's the benefit of trusts? What's the benefit of property? How can I get someone to protect me? So, Yolanda, thank you so much for being a part of this. We may have to line up another one, but
Yeah.
in a little bit of time, Ariana and I are both writing exams at the beginning of September. So this was our last live before it, but we're
Okay.
so grateful for your time. We appreciate it.
you.
And hopefully we can do a holiday to Cape Town sometime. I know it's nice and close to the waterfront.
Yeah,
So
you're welcome.
we'll come and have a visit with you, and then that will be quite nice because I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you
Definitely. Thank
so
you
much,
for your
Daniel.
time.
And I also really enjoyed the conversation, and you are more than welcome to come visit us when you're at the site.
Awesome.
Just make sure it's not winter, because I know people who are not from Cape
I'll
Town complain a
end up
lot
flying.
when they come here during the wrong season.
Yeah.
And all the best
Awesome.
with your exam.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have an awesome weekend. Cheers,
Thank
everyone, to all
you.
the listeners.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.